Am I wrong for calling my sister cruel for her tattoo idea? Depends what it is. Let's see what if it's really cruel. This is 28 and I'm 26 male. My sister N has always had a strained relationship with our parents, especially my mom. I'm clearly not privy to the reasons because things are fine with me and my parents. When N went to college, she met her creative writing professor as a freshman and they got close immediately. They would do a lot together and work closely on a few different writing projects. N never specifically said this, but it was obvious to anyone who saw them interact that they had a substitute mother/daughter type relationship, which hurt my mom a lot to see. I always thought that she'd grow out of it or that the professor would move on, but 10 years later, they are still very close. About a month ago, the professor died unexpectedly and it devastated N. She was really depressed over the holidays, which of course was all in front of my mom, and was a difficult reminder that N loved the professor as a mother way more than she ever loved my mom as a mother. She still talks to my parents about stuff and they don't fight or anything, but N is very distant and doesn't tell them anything about her life beyond the bare minimum. My mom tried to comfort N, but N was doing her distant thing and didn't want comfort. Something unfortunate that happened to N is that when she got the call that she died, she was brewing tea and in the shock of the news, she spilled boiling water on her arm, which burned her kind of badly on her wrist. I think the burn was like on the borderline of 2nd and 3rd degree and definitely still looked pretty rough during the holidays. N said it was especially hard because in addition to the physical pain, every time she looks at it, she is reminded of the moment she found out the professor died, which I totally get. I was on FaceTime with N and she said she talked to her tattoo artist friend who said that the burn should be able to heal well enough to get a tattoo over it. N then excitedly told me about her idea, which is a type of flower that the professor gave her a bouquet of for her undergrad graduation. My mom was so embarrassed that day because she didn't get N flowers, but the professor did, and N was parading them around so happy, and it was a reminder of their connection. I guess N and the professor exchanged these flowers for every special occasion like birthdays. So now she wants to get a decent sized tattoo in a highly visible spot of something that will remind everyone of the professor. I told N that this seemed really cruel to my mom, who already feels cast aside and like she's in exile from N. And that's without the constant permanent reminder. N kind of scoffed and said, "I can't believe you think you have the right to tell me not to do this." Called me an ass and hung up and is still not talking to me except for a very brief text message saying congrats for a promotion I just got. My parents aren't commenting. My dad said I should have just kept quiet even though he agrees, and my mom made no comment but seemed grateful I stood up for her. I feel like I was just being protective of my mom. But am I the asshole?
My cheating boyfriend hates clowns, and I'm a petty bitch. I, female 26, recently found out my asshole boyfriend, Kenneth, male 28, fake names FYI, cheated on me with my best friend, now ex-best friend, Teresa, female 25. But it happened during a party a few months ago from what I've gathered, and since then they continued seeing each other, hooking up whenever they could. Kenneth has lied to me saying he was going to the gym, and I believed him because I had no reason not to. But last week I saw Teresa was snapping Kenneth, which was odd because I had never seen them communicate outside of the group chat. So I checked the messages, I know, and found a ton of dirty messages between the two of them, with her explicit bits out and all. Their convo went back and forth talking about how he shouldn't be with me, she can treat him better, etc., and he fed right into it. I wanted to scream and lash out at him as soon as he got out of the shower, but I didn't. I closed the phone, kept cool, and played it off like nothing happened. Now to this past week. It's October. My boyfriend hates clowns, despises them. We watched the movie Terrifier a few months ago, and it messed him up so badly that he couldn't sleep without the bathroom light on for weeks, literally. So I got to talking with one of my old friends, we'll call him Steven. Steven does improv at our local coffee shop a few times a month, and he's pretty good. I explained what was going on to Steven, and we decided to play a little game with Kenneth before I broke it off with him. I gave Kenneth's number to Steven, two different friend groups, they don't really know each other, and had him start periodically calling him for the past few days, just staying completely silent. Kenneth told me about the calls and I just shrugged, telling him I didn't know the number. So he blocked the number and went on about his business. Now I tell Kenneth I want to watch a scary movie, a clown movie, Terrifier 2. Oh yeah, he is adamantly against that. But I beg and plead and eventually it gets turned on. We're watching and we get a knock on the door. "It's late. Who could that be?" Kenneth asks. I make him go answer the door. Nobody there. Another knock a few minutes later. Kenneth checks. Nothing there. At this point, he's getting antsy. The movie is getting extremely graphic, and I'm having a blast because I know what's about to happen. "Honey, I think there's something in our yard." I tell Kenneth to go look out the window. There, in our pitch black yard, is Steven, in full Terrifier clown attire, waving at Kenneth. Kenneth loses his absolute mind. He stumbles back and asks me what the hell is happening. I shrug, saying I have no idea. He cracks the door open and screams for whoever is in our yard to get the hell out of it. Steven shrugs and leaves, and Kenneth is pissed and confused, and I talk him down from calling the police, saying someone was just playing a harmless prank. At this point, he's pretty much refusing to continue watching the movie, but I managed to convince him to just let us finish it. So we press play, and then more knocks. Really loud this time. Kenneth gets up, pissed, and marches to the door, swings it open, and Stephen jumps forward, screaming in full-on clown mode. Kenneth screams and falls backwards. He was okay, no injuries aside from his ego, as Stephen burst into laughter. Kenneth starts cursing Stephen out before I stop him, then tell him that he's a cheating piece of shit, and that this was all to get back at him, because I know he's cheating on me with Teresa. Long story short, we're in the process of packing up his stuff to get him moved out now. We rent. My name is the only one on the lease. Soon, I'll have this asshole out of my life. I haven't thought of a clever way to get back at Teresa yet. Me and Stephen have some scheming to do, but we'll figure it out. So that's my petty revenge story for you.
Okay, today we're talking about all the offensive things I've said to people going to a Mormon school as someone that's not Mormon. The first one, I was at the park. This was my very first semester up here. I'm at the park and I'm like meeting a bunch of new people, and I meet this guy and his name is Brigham. I didn't know Brigham was a prophet that the school was named after, okay? So he tells me his name is Brigham, and I look at him like he's stupid, and I was like, Brigham, like the school, like you were named after the college? These people around me are like, no, Brigham, like the prophet? And I was like, the prophet? Not even, like, I didn't even know what a prophet was at this point. Yeah, I'm sure that was like mildly offensive and like dumb of me to say. Number 2 is me and my sister met these British guys actually, and they said something about like how cool it was to think that like Jesus was in America. And I look at him like he was stupid. I was like, Jesus has never come to America. Little did I know the entire Book of Mormon is about Jesus being in America. And they just thought it was like crazy that I had never heard of that, which is kind of crazy considering I go to BYU and I didn't know what the Book of Mormon was, or the Pearl of Great Price, or the Doctrines and Covenants. Some things I can't even say because they're actually like really offensive, but I just wanted to make this because there are so many negative comments in my last video of people like apologizing to me that people have like said rude things to me, but it's like, at the end of the day, I chose to go to a Mormon school, and it definitely goes both ways. Like, I'm not perfect. I've definitely said some offensive things to people.
I don't think so.
Oh, on the train of rude things people have said to me, one time, this guy was walking me home from class, and he just randomly, like, because obviously there's not a lot of divorce in Mormon culture. I'm sure there's more now. But I, like, told him my parents were divorced, like, a week leading up to this, and he's walking me home, and he's like, so how do you think your parents' divorce, like, affected you? And I was like, that's a crazy question to ask, and also I was like, I was 6 when it happened, like, I don't really think it affected me. I feel like nobody would ever ask me that at home because most people's parents are divorced, but here it was just, like, crazy. Oh! Another crazy thing I said to someone was, it was actually my roommate at the time, and we had a good talk about it afterwards, but she was just basically talking to me about, like, how she had a spiritual experience visiting, like, a historical church site. It was the Garden of Eden. I can't remember where it is. It was, like, it's supposed to be in Missouri or something. But basically, prior to me knowing she had that, like, the spiritual experience, I basically said something about how that's another reason I don't believe in the church is because I don't think the Garden of Eden is in Missouri. And then she, like, had a talk with me afterwards, and she was like, honestly, I have a really strong testimony of, like, feeling the spirit there, and, like, she was basically just, like, be careful saying those things, because, like, people have strong testimonies of it. I don't know, like, we had a good conversation about it, but I was just like, I don't think that's where the Garden of Eden is, and she was like, well, I have a testimony of it, and, yeah, she's on her mission now. I love her. She was, like, such a good roommate, but it's, like, people within this church have very emotional testimonies. They just feel strongly about the things they believe, and it's like, you really can hurt someone's feelings by just being like, no, that's not true, that sounds stupid, which is what I said about a lot of things when I first got up here.
A real true crime case of a killer clown. On the morning of May 26, 1990, Marlene Morin had a visitor at her door. When she opened her door, standing in front of her was a clown holding flowers and balloons. Before Marlene even knew what was happening, the clown took out a revolver and shot her in the face. Since it's now October, you guys have been asking me to cover the most terrifying true crime cases I know, and truly, what is scarier than a real killer clown? Marlene's son and some of his friends were over for breakfast, and they could see everything that happened. They saw the clown just turn around and walk slowly, silently back to the car that they came in, get in the car, and just drive away like nothing happened. Marlene was rushed to the hospital, but sadly passed away 2 days later from her injuries. When a woman is killed, the first person that investigators look at is the husband. Marlene and Mike Warren owned multiple properties and businesses together, but they were also having severe marital problems. Marlene suspected that her husband Mike had been having an affair, and that she was even afraid for her life. She told multiple people before she passed away that if something happened to her, her husband was the one that did it. But her husband had an airtight alibi. It could not have been him that came to her house dressed like a clown and had shot her. Could he have hired someone? And what about the woman that he was having this rumored affair with? That woman was Sheila Keene. Sheila was also married actually to a member of the KKK. And it was pretty well-known knowledge that Sheila and Michael were having an affair, that they were sleeping together, although they always denied it. They claimed that they were just friends. But even Sheila's own neighbors thought that Michael was her husband instead of her actual KKK husband because of how often Michael was over at her house. But just because two people may or may not be having an affair is not enough to charge someone with murder. Well, luckily, the investigators started to gather a lot of convincing evidence. They were able to track down the costume shop where the clown costume had been purchased. The owners of the costume shop said that 2 days before Marlene was killed, a woman with dark brown hair and big brown eyes came after closing to the shop, frantically saying that she needed to get in because she needed to get a clown costume. This would be, typical behavior if it was the day before Halloween, but this was in the middle of spring. And the owners of that costume shop were able to identify Sheila as that woman from a photo lineup. And the same description of the same woman, long brown hair, big brown eyes, was seen at the Publix grocery store right near Marlene's house the day that she passed away, purchasing those flowers and balloons that the clown was holding. 4 days after Marlene was killed, the same car that the clown was seen driving was found abandoned in a parking lot 8 miles away. In the backseat of the car was a Publix grocery store bag, so things are lining up, and inside of the bag were orange wig fibers, likely from the orange clown wig. And that same car had actually been reported stolen. It was from a used car shop that Marlene's husband Michael was the owner of, so things are not looking good. And speaking of Marlene's husband Michael, investigators do not trust this man. They believe that Michael and his mistress Sheila were the ones that killed Marlene, so they start investigating every single aspect of Michael's life. They start investigating his businesses. Remember, him and Marlene owned a lot of businesses together, and they actually found out that Michael had been committing a lot of fraud through his businesses. They actually charged him with 43 counts of fraud and racketeering, and he went to prison for 3 years because of this. After his release, him and Sheila both just kind of disappeared. They both left the area and no one knew where they went. And that's all that the investigators had for a really, really long time. This case went unsolved for years and years. Luckily, the investigators could not let this case go. Even independent journalists were unable to let this case go. They demanded that Marlene's case did not go unsolved, and what they were able to find next was shocking. Turns out, 12 years after Marlene was killed, her husband Michael married Sheila in a secret wedding. Now remember, Michael always denied having an affair with Sheila. Sheila, who is the prime suspect in his wife's murder. He married the prime suspect in his wife's murder 12 years later in a secret wedding. It's like super suspicious. It had been years since Marlene had been killed, and investigators and independent journalists were able to work together and finally track down Michael and Sheila. Turns out, after being married in secret for a little bit, the two of them actually moved states together. They opened a restaurant together. Sheila had dyed her hair suspiciously the same color as Marlene's hair, looking like her husband's dead wife. Kind of weird. Sheila was also going by a new name, and everyone that knew Sheila and Michael in this new area that went to their restaurant all the time had no idea that the two of them had ever been married before. They did not know that Michael had a dead wife. They knew nothing about any of this. This is when we found out that the investigators were actually holding on to a really big piece of evidence. They had DNA that was left in that car that the clown had drove that was abandoned in that parking lot. But DNA testing was not the same in the 90s that it was now. But the investigators kept onto it just in case DNA testing ever got better. So they start retesting all of their old DNA, and that's when they finally linked Sheila's DNA to the DNA that they found in the car. It had been 27 years since Marlene had been killed, and Sheila was finally arrested for murdering her on September 26, 2017. And I bet for those nearly 3 decades, Sheila believed that she had gone away with it. They actually found a photo that was taken years after Marlene was killed of Sheila at a Halloween party, and guess what she dressed up as? She dressed up as a clown. Tell me that's not the sickest, most evil thing you've ever heard of. And I bet in her mind, she thought it was funny, dressing up like a clown for Halloween a few years after killing Marlene while dressed up as a clown. Originally, the prosecution was going for the death penalty in the trial of Sheila Keene, but after the trial was postponed so many times during the 2020 pandemic, they ended up offering her a plea deal, and sadly she did take the plea deal, and it was if she pled guilty to killing Marlene that they would only give her 12 years in prison, and she's expected to be released next year in 2025. Apparently, there was never enough evidence to charge Michael Warren in the murder of his wife. As of right now, only Sheila has ever been charged, which really upsets me because I feel like we had enough evidence to charge Sheila. So if we were going to offer her a plea deal, it would have been to incriminate Michael.
That's Carly, and she found out that her boyfriend was dating her baby sister, who she had twins with and was dating off and on for the past 10 years. Now, this is her full-blood sister. They grew up together, they were best friends, and this is her boyfriend of 10 years, her high school sweetheart. When she found out, this completely devastated her. Back when she had her baby in 2020, her baby sister had had twins right before her and moved away to Colorado. So she was kind of mourning and going through postpartum depression. Her sister moving away, having these babies. She was going through a lot. She ended up actually admitting herself into a psych ward. She said it was the best decision she ever made. She's better off because of it. And it was in case my, sister or my ex-boyfriend tried to use that against me, that made me a better person. It wasn't a negative experience. Also, in that same time as she's having the baby, her sister's moving away of having her own family. Her boyfriend also moved away for college and started playing hockey. And so she's just going through it at this point, right? Fast forward to 2024, her sister and her husband end up, leading down a road towards divorce. They both end up doing dirt, and they just decide it's best that we, kind of end this marriage. And so the family ends up thinking, Carly's family ends up thinking maybe it's best that you come and stay with us. And so her having the biggest house out of everyone, her mom, her sister, all of that, she decided that she should come stay with her and the twins be, with the other set of twins and be able to have that kind of cousin time. Around this time earlier this year, she also noticed that her boyfriend was going out a lot, and so she was like, I know you go out a lot, but this is a little excessive. So she decides to go through his Snapchat, finds out that he was Snapchatting her sister, and she's like, that's weird. She taps on it and the messages are gone, and she's like, that's even weirder. Why would you delete the messages? Sees that the last message was sent around 3 o'clock in the morning. So she's very suspicious at this point, especially knowing what went down with her sister's marriage. She's like, what is my sister doing? What is my boyfriend doing? After debating on whether or not she should say anything, she ends up messaging her sister and being like, hey, what were you and my boyfriend talking about? And she's like, oh, nothing. He was just messaging me to tell me that I should, leave my husband. That's all it was. And I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to, cause any drama. Because Carly was like, if I talked to your husband, I would tell you. I wouldn't keep it a secret, And so she was like, yeah, I didn't want to cause any drama. She kind of chalked it up to being okay, I kind of understand that. She tried to ask her baby daddy, knowing he is a chronic liar. And he was kind of said the same thing. The stories lined up, so she was just whatever, I'm gonna let this blow over. So at this point, the sister has moved in, and she stays there from mid-April to mid-May, about a month. And Carly has a full-time job. She works 9 to 5 as a dog groomer, so she was gone doing work. The boyfriend works in the garage, and so the baby sister was there to kind of take care of the 2 sets of twins. This is where the opportunity for the baby sister and the boyfriend to kind of create a bond ended up happening. Well, I guess they kind of already had a bond because they were messaging before she ever moved in, and then once she did move in, it just kind of grew from there. She says that she never had like physical proof that anything happened, but she said that her baby sister went from hating her ex-boyfriend to buying him food, bringing him food, running him errands. Like, how did that switch off happen? Like, you guys hated each other for years and now all of a sudden you're doing favors? Like, it's very weird. So at this point, Carla is already like not feeling her relationship with her boyfriend anymore. She's like, you know, kind of like moving towards wanting to break up as well. They are having like sister bonding time, going out, having fun, and they would flirt with guys. The baby sister would like encourage her to flirt, like, go get his Snapchat, go get his number, like, do your thing, girl, like, you know. So she also thought that was kind of weird that she was actually like pushing her to end her relationship as well. So one night after having like a sister bonding outing, they're heading back home, they're drunk, they're in their Uber, and Carla, you know, glances over to her sister's phone and sees that she's texting her boyfriend. And she looks at her and she goes, why are you texting him? She's drunk. She barely remembers this in the morning. She was coherent enough to be like, why are you texting my boyfriend? Like, what are you doing? And their older sister is with them in the car as well too. She tells her baby sister, if you don't show me the phone, I'm going to beat your ass. And she doesn't show her the phone. That's all she remembers the next morning. She breaks up with the boyfriend. He moves out of the house, goes and lives with his parents. So the second half of the time that the baby sister is staying with Carly, the boyfriend is gone. He's moved back in with the parents. But a few nights he would get in fights with his parents and end up having to spend the night at Carly's house. And when he would do that, she noticed that the baby sister would leave the door open. When he was gone, she would close the door to the bedroom. But when he was there, she would leave it open. And then she would hear like the sound machine really loud at like 3 o'clock in the morning and would text her like, hey, are you okay? Like, why is the sound machine on? She's like, yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm just in the bathroom. So she would notice that like her behavior would change. And then she also noticed that her ex-boyfriend started coming home and like showering, changing, putting like nice clothes on just to chill in the house. And she's like, I know you're not looking good for me. Are you like Snapchatting somebody, or is it for my baby sister? Like, she just started to just like notice huge red flags, and neither of them were accepting or trying to hold themselves accountable for what they were actually doing. They were just gaslighting her. And then one day her brother brings up the conversation of like, hey, have you noticed the way your ex-boyfriend looks at our sister? Like, have you peeped the way that they stare at each other? She's like, you know what, I kind of did peep that, and I peeped that he's always like behind her and like staring at her. Like, it's weird. So like even the family started noticing. So at this point, you know, the boyfriend's not in the house, they're not together anymore, and he comes up to Carly and is like, hey, I want to invite you guys over to my parents' cabin in the lake, and like, you know, have you, your sister, both sets of twins, like, you know, your other siblings, like, all come out and enjoy the lake. And she's like, I don't know why you're trying to do something nice for me, but I think that'd be really cool for like the kids to experience that, so let's do it. So that Friday, she comes home from work, she's getting ready, showering, getting ready to go head out to the lake, and she sees that her baby daddy's phone is charging in the kitchen. And so she goes to look at it, and it's locked, but she can see, you know, notifications on the lock screen. She sees that one of the notifications is a text message from her baby sister who's sitting right there in the kitchen with her. And so she's just like furious at this point and just looks at her and goes, what did you text my baby daddy that you couldn't tell him 5 minutes ago while we're both in this house together? And I don't know what the ex-boyfriend heard, but she saw him running into that room faster than she's ever seen him run before. He snatches the phone from her and they both just start deleting things. And she's just like, you guys are not giving me any information. I'm so confused. Just be honest with me. I deserve the truth. They're like, we're not even talking about anything. We're trying to figure out what we're going to make for dinner. And she's like, neither of you ever make dinner. I make dinner. What are you talking about right now? They're just gaslighting her. So at this point, this baby sister just starts packing up her things. She just starts grabbing everything and, you know, moving it into the room and starts packing up her stuff. The baby daddy starts helping her do that. And before you know it, they pack up their stuff, they jump into the car, and they ride off into the sunset, she says. After that, the baby sister goes to their mother's house and stays there. The baby daddy ends up going back to his parents' house and staying there. She thought she was going to wake up the next morning to like an apology message or a phone call from one of them, from both of them. She didn't wake up to anything. Radio silence from both of those people. The mother's trying to talk to the baby sister and get information out of her. She's not trying to tell her anything. The other siblings are trying to talk to the baby sister. She's not trying to give up any information. She's just like mums the word, like, I'm not saying anything. So Saturday night rolls around and she's like, I just have a little sneaky feeling. And the only thing she had access to was his Uber account. So she opens up his Uber account and sees that in the last 5 to 10 minutes, he caught an Uber from some random bar to her mother's house. And she's like, oh, hell no. Now her brother lives closer to her mother than she does. She calls her brother and she's like, head over to mom's right now. He's like, I'm on it. Starts jamming over there. She's like, I need to get, you know, somebody to watch my kids. So she calls her other sister. Her other sister pulls up, watches the babies. She hops in the car. At that point, she also calls the ex-boyfriend. He's like, where are you? Where are you at? And he's like, I'm at a friend's house. She's like, oh yeah? Well, FaceTime me. Show me where you're at. And at that point, he's like, no. He figures out something is up, right? The brother's already on his way. So she's hoping that he can catch them in the act, essentially. She hangs up with the boyfriend. She calls her brother back, and all she hears on the phone is him honking, yelling, saying like, what the F are you doing? What the F are you doing? The brother tells her like, yep, I see him. He's right here. He's running away. He's hiding behind trees. I don't know what he's doing, but I do see him. And so at that point, Carly pulls up and they're chasing the ex-boyfriend through the streets and he's drunk off his ass. And so they finally catch up to him. They're like, dude, get in the car. They drive back to her mother's house. They sit the baby sister down. They sit down the boyfriend and they're like, tell us what's going on. Tell us right now. They're both like not trying to say anything. She's like, I don't know why he's here. He just showed up. He knocked on the door. I was trying to tell him, don't touch me, get away from me. Like, I don't know why he's here. And he's just drunk. He can't even like speak for himself. So eventually his mother comes and picks him up. Carly and the ex-boyfriend's mother do not get along, so she couldn't even get anything out of the mother either. She just picked up her son and then they went about her day. At this point, she walks back inside and she's trying to get more information out of the sister, and the sister's just gaslighting her at this point and manipulating her, saying like, you're a horrible sister, like you've always been a horrible sister my entire life, like why would you think this of me? He just showed up. I would never do anything like that. She's like, okay, at this point, I'm realizing I'm really not going to get anything out of you. All I ask from you is that you just block my ex-boyfriend on everything, just so I know you guys aren't communicating. And she agrees. She's like, okay, fine, I'll block him on everything. The baby sister stays at the mother's house. She returns back to her own home. She tries to talk to the baby daddy the next day and ask like, hey, so is there anything you want to tell me? And he was just like, it was just a joke. I just wanted to piss you off. Like nothing even happened, basically. At this point, she's like, I just need to get my kids. I need to get a lease. I need to get an apartment and I need to get out of here. I do not need to be around these people anymore. She's like, I'm cutting off my sister. Unfortunately, I can't cut off my baby daddy because he is the father to my children. But like, I'm not going to talk to him outside of anything that has to do with our children. So a few months fly by, June comes around, the baby sister has to come back into town for something to do with work, and so she's going to stay at the mother's house. The family's pretty fed up with the sister too, like she's not telling them anything, and the mother is the mother, so she's going to obviously open her doors to her baby, and so she stays there. She just starts doing really weird things, like she would tell the mom like, hey, I'm going to go to the grocery store. She would leave at 8 p.m. and not return until 3 o'clock in the morning. Like what? And then her husband, he had put an air tag in her car and she threw the air tag out in like Target because she was like, I don't want to be tracked. And so she was just like acting pretty erratic in the family's perspective. She doesn't know for sure if the baby daddy and the sister were hanging out that second time she came to town when she was staying with her mother, but a lot of times where they were would kind of like coincide. It would just be like a coincidence, but it's like you can't have that many coincidences. August was really tough for Carly. She was just like, I lost my little family. I'm losing the home that I built with him. Like I'm mourning so many different things, you know, like my sister, like it just was a really hard time for her. And so she says that she fell and she did like miss him a little bit. So she ended up like inviting him over a few times in August. And one of the days that she invited him over, they're both getting into bed and he's like, oh, can you set an alarm for me for the next day? And she looks at him and she's like, why don't you set an alarm on your own phone? And he's like, oh, it's in my pants somewhere. And she realized he left his phone at his parents' house so that his parents wouldn't know that he was at her house. And she's like, so your parents have an issue with you being with the mother of your children and spending time with their grandchildren, but they don't have a problem with you possibly moving on from me and going and dating my baby sister? Because they all had a sit down talk with both sets of parents and was just like, here's the issue at hand. The parents of the ex-boyfriend were unbothered. They were just like, okay, like what else is tea, you know? So all the siblings are still on the mother's phone plan. And so the mother decides, hey, I'm going to go and check the phone logs. So when she goes and checks the phone logs of the baby sister, she sees that not only has the boyfriend and the baby sister been talking, they've been talking for the last 4 months, several times a day for several hours, all the time. Like she said, in a span of 2 days at one point, they had over 60 phone calls. How is that not inappropriate? How? At this point, Carly breaks the no contact that she had with her sister and messages her with all the information, fills her in with what she knows, and is like, so tell me, what is going on? Like, why are you talking to me? She's like, I'm not even talking to him like that. It's not even like that. We're just talking about life and like being there for each other. We're not even talking like that. She tells her, look, baby sister, this is the last time we're going to talk. You might as well just tell me the truth now. I deserve to know the truth. My babies deserve to know the truth. What is going on? And the baby sister she wouldn't tell her anything. She just kept saying like, it's not what you think it is. She told her, I have no interest in your boyfriend. We're not even talking like that. She gets off the phone with her. She sends both the ex-boyfriend and the baby sister a nasty message. She does regret it now, but she was just like, I just had to get it off my chest. She tells them off. At this point, the family has also completely cut off the baby sister. Nobody's talking to her. She wasn't even being honest with them. Even when they would call and check in on her because they understood that she was going through stuff, especially in her own marriage, she would ignore them. they realized that she'd rather talk to the ex-boyfriend and have 60 conversations with him in a span of 48 hours than, you know, pick up phone calls from her own family. So they were just like all done with it and kind of rid their hands of it. So then fast forward to recently, she gets a phone call from the boyfriend being like, hey, I'm heading out of town for a golf tournament. And she's like, it's pretty late in the year to be going to a golf tournament. Also, like, it's pretty cold where we live. So like, that has to be a lie. And she's like, you know what? I don't even care. Like, obviously you're about to go see my baby sister. I could care less. Like, do you, boo boo? At this point, she has moved out. She's signed her own apartment lease. She's moving on with her life, taking care of her babies, which are her number one priority, as they should be. And she's not worried about him. And so she's just living her life. She gets a phone call from a very trusted friend a few days later telling her like, hey, just so you know, your baby daddy is lying to you. He's not about to go to no golf tournament. He's actually headed to go see your sister. And she's like, I knew it. I already knew it. Whatever. I don't care. So the weekend comes and goes. The very next weekend, she's having quality time with her siblings that she loves. She has like a lot of siblings. She has like half siblings, step siblings. Like, she has a very good support system and she's spending time with them. And she's like, okay, I'm going to go run errands. You guys got my babies. So she goes to run errands. She comes back in and everybody's in the living room. They look like they're about to throw up. And they're like, look, sis, like, you need to sit down so we can tell you this. And they sit down. The brother basically tells her, like, it's been confirmed through the grapevine that after the weekend that they spent together last weekend, baby sister and ex-boyfriend have decided to pursue their relationship together and be public about it. They're just like, we obviously have feelings for each other. It should have been obvious. How is it obvious when you were gaslighting, manipulating, and lying the entire summer, the entire year, essentially, and telling us that it wasn't like that, you weren't talking like that, you were just talking about life, and then now it's, oh, we're in a relationship together and it should have been obvious? Like, how is that even possible? So Carly's like, honestly, good riddance. I don't even care. Like, you clearly want to be with each other. You clearly love each other. All everybody was asking for in the beginning was honesty, you know? So yeah, that's basically the story. I wanted to share it with you guys. The reason Carla, I even shared it in the, and I don't know if I'm saying her name right. It might be Carly or Carly, I don't know.